So the other day, I was watching one of my new favorite channel's latest videos. And I really enjoyed his concept of playing through Cyberpunk 2077 using only craftable items. Chances are that if you clicked on this video, you've likely already seen it, but in case you haven't, you should definitely check it out. After you finish this one, of course. The one thing I noticed while watching his playthrough was that there are some pretty kick-ass weapons available for you to craft. That is, if you take the time to hunt down their crafting specs by thwarting the neighborhood organized crime syndicates. Now, these crafting specs, being that they're random, can either be super great or complete dog shit. I personally didn't want to bother taking the time to go farm these crafting specs, nor did I want to just outright steal his video idea, and since I'm a masochist, I was curious, yet again, how far could I push this idea for an extra more harder challenge? So I booted up Cyberpunk and began a new game on the hardest difficulty, not really sure what my plan was. All I knew was that Lars crafted a bat first, so I was gonna go with a knife. Mostly for the flexibility and range, but also to be different. Now, assuming that you read the title, you all know what my video idea turned into, but let me briefly explain the rules. I can only craft and use items provided in the base pool of craftable items, which is basically just a handful of weapons, some attachments, ammo, and various crafting components. I can only pick up broken weapons, jewelry, and trash, and can only dismantle weapons I've created. I did, however, accidentally pick up a couple iconic weapons throughout this run, as well as a sniper rifle Pan Am gives you since I wanted to be a nomad from start to finish, but to resist any temptation of using these weapons, I just stored them in my stash and never looked at them again. Lars made a good point in his video about how you're technically crafting XP by playing this game, so spending that crafted XP on perks was technically abiding by the rules. And I was also going to craft my ammo like he did, but I couldn't get the mod he used to function correctly, and I ended up still picking up all the ammo off the floor anyway, so yeah. Let me interject. Editor Vetter here. I now know, after completing this run of course, that the mod wasn't working because this add-on here is required for the mod to work. And as you can see, it never actually downloaded, but it's really not all that big of a deal since I'm already limiting myself a pretty healthy enough amount. Anyways, that's just about everything, so let's get this show on the road. Like I said, I chose the Nomad life path as it's clearly a fitting start to a run full of crafting. Plus, I'd never played this game as a nomad before, so all the more reason. Generally, I don't waste my time creating a worthwhile character for these runs since I'm not really ever invested in the character as much as I am the run itself, so I hit the random option a few times and went with the one I stopped on, which left me looking straight out of Portland. After stepping into my new life and getting my car working again, I met up with Jackie in an abandoned trailer way out in the middle of nowhere to be the driver for some cargo headed into Night City. We predictably got stopped at the border, and I ended up having to get out of my car to bribe the customs officer. This is such a standard practice in this type of work that these bribes are often even provided by the fixer. After dealing with the officer, I hopped back into my car with Jackie, this time in the passenger seat. Something felt off about the officer I just dealt with, and just as I expected, he'd tipped off Arasaka. We were now being chased by multiple cars, shooting at us as we fled. At this point, I do have a weapon as the game provided me with one, but it's not one that I, myself, crafted. I don't even have the ability to do so, even if I wanted to. So the plan was to just repeat this chase scene until I got lucky enough with my RNG to just barely survive the entirety of the chase and escape into an empty garage. Once Jack and I were safe, we decided to crack open the safe and see what kind of cargo we almost just got killed over. And it was an iguana? Huh. That's not what I was expecting. Anyway, after talking with this dude a little bit, I decided he was an alright guy after all.
You
AC's Legends! Know where you'll find most of them? The graveyard!
And we're back to the real beginning of this game. Jackie and I are just arriving at the building of our current gig. We're looking for a woman named Sandra Dorset, believed to be kidnapped and held at this seedy sect of apartments we'd found ourselves in. And for the sake of time, at this juncture, Lars reduced his difficulty to easy as this part is heavily reliant on Jackie, and an increase in difficulty to this section really just means an increase in time. Now, the difference between Lars and myself is that I haven't had multiple runs where I kept the difficulty high and waited out the suffering of Jackie's bad AI, but since it's not really related to the difficulty and is literally just a time save, I'm gonna do that too. Anyway, once Jackie was able to incapacitate enough enemies, I finally had enough crafting components to make my first weapon, a basic knife. For better or for worse, in all the time it took me to gather up all the resources to build this thing, Jackie had pretty much taken care of everyone, and all that was left was the big guy in the back. Now, I hadn't really changed the difficulty back at this point, since it requires a reload of a previous save, and it really wasn't worth it for me to take the time to do this, so the big guy only took 2 knives to the head, and he was out. Jack and I pushed past the fresh corpses into the back bathroom where, lo and behold, there was Miss Dorset, unconscious in a tub full of ice water. She wasn't looking too hot, and I wasn't sure she was gonna make it, but after pulling out some malware, the heck is that word malware? Malware. But after pulling out some malware from her no-no slot, her platinum level trauma team was quick to pick her up and get her somewhere safe to recover. With the gig now complete, Jackie and I decided to head home and rest up after such a grueling day. But not before staring at a van until it crashed into a building. After a good night's sleep, I woke up to a call from my good pal Jackie, already ready for more action. Man, this guy doesn't rest, does he? Well, whether I was ready or not, we had another gig on the docket, and this was one I couldn't afford to pass up. Jackie had pulled some massive strings, literally overnight, and scored us an audience with the fat-ass Black Jesus himself, Dexter Deshawn. But first I had to stop by Vic's and get implanted with some cyberware, but don't worry, I'll be removing all this as soon as I possibly can, except for the eyes. I kinda need those. I don't know any way around not having to accept these new eyes, so we're just gonna accept that they're there and move on. After getting hooked up by Vic, I once again hop into Dex's ride as he proceeds to inform me of all the crap he's about to ask me to do. Yeah, I remember this all from last time. Talk to Evelyn and secure the flathead. Yeah. Obviously, we're gonna be calling Miss Stout again for her free money since I found out that I can hack the data shard and keep the money for myself. And you're probably asking me, why would I be needing this money? And I'd just tell you that you needed to mind your own damn business. After making my way into the Maelstrom rat den and meeting up with the hothead known as Royce, I decided, since I was extra strong this run, to cordially introduce his face to the whip of my pistol. Of course, this wasn't without consequence. His goons immediately retaliated with gunfire, which led me to retreat back to the back room with my knife drawn while Jackie offered me some friendly advice.
Shoot me!
I can't, Jackie. I only have a knife. Once he and I were about halfway through the exit to this place, the money from Militech came through and I ended up finally acquiring a gun. I'm a sucker for pistols and semi-auto weapons in games in general, and since there are no semi-auto rifles available for me to craft, the pistol it is. Specifically, the DR5 Nova. This thing was awesome. Now, I don't want to spend a ton of time covering what perks I ended up purchasing. All you really need to know is that most of my attribute points went to Cool first for all of its pistol buffs, Body second for its health regeneration benefits, and Tech third solely for the perk Lucky Day. After Jackie and I secured the flathead and cleared our way through the Maelstrom compound, I was now off to Lizzie's to meet up with Evelyn to learn what I could about the chip Dex wants us to collect. Now, like every other time, I'm fed a BD from Evelyn herself that she managed to record on one of her visits to Yorinobu's private penthouse. This was most likely where the chip was being held. Lo and behold, I found what appeared to be a refrigerated safe, meeting the exact holding requirements to keep the biochip stable. Now that I had all the intel and equipment Dex wanted me to gather, I was off to meet back up with the team at the most elite fixer bar in Night City, the Afterlife. Going over the plan one last time, I take this opportunity to inform Dex about how Evelyn wanted me to stab him in the back. Knowing what I know now, this is pretty ironic, but I wanted to see what would happen if I told him. Spoiler, you just get an extra 10% cut on the job. Once we wrapped up our meeting, Jackie and I stepped into our luxury Delamain on our way to Konpeki Plaza, the beginnings of a job that'll be sure to change our lives forever. As soon as I stepped foot in the plaza, I began to see red. No, literally, my screen just went completely red for some reason. Jesus Christ, I can't wait to get a new computer. Anyway, after we got settled in our room, I play a game of Hide the Flathead with the plaza's netrunner, then went up to the penthouse suite to recover the relic we came here for. Jackie tried to lighten the mood in the elevator by telling a joke that I don't think I'll ever understand.
Okay, so why'd the Rocker Boy's output kick him out of the apartment? Because he wasn't chipping in.
Once the relic was in our possession, Jack and I found ourselves smashed into the backside of a TV screen with front row seats to the Arasaki daddy-daughter dance. Wait, that's not a dance, and that's not a daughter. Turns out we bought tickets to the wrong show and were forced to watch the literal last breath leave an old man's mouth. What the fuck is that? Now that the building was on full lockdown, our only option was to jump. With the biochip now safely inside Jackie, we now have to fight our way through the plaza back to our Delamain. I unfortunately have to let Jackie do most of the work here, as I had to leave all my weapons in the car, and I stupidly spent all my components making weapons right before entering. Now I wonder how many times it's gonna take me doing stupid shit for it to become a meme on this channel. Anyway, just after the first group of enemies was dealt with and I'd converted all my trash into components, I had just enough tier 1 components to convert the exact amount of tier 2 needed to build my first green weapon of the run, Liberty. Now, I thought the DR5 was great, but this thing... This thing has some serious kick. Oh, and I said I wasn't really gonna cover perks all that much, but I do want to highlight ones that helped me throughout this playthrough, the first one being Focus. This perk would not only give me 10% bonus to headshots and weak spot damage, but its second tier grants me a 2.5 second window of slowed time to position my crosshairs more carefully and blast away. Now confident that my bullets were sure to make contact with my enemies' skulls. Also, side note, I'm playing this on a controller for comfort reasons, so my aim isn't all that great, and this perk really just gave me that extra handicap I needed. Pushing through to the next floor, I got steamrolled a few times back to back, so I decided to pull out the tier 1 LMG to see if I could turn the tides. And why was I not surprised? Not only am I not spec'd for LMGs at all, but it's a tier 1. This wasn't at all gonna be of use to me, so back to the pistol I go. After getting rolled even a few more times, I finally began to play it ultra safe, ducking out of cover and playing chicken with only one enemy at a time. This method proved a success as Jackie and I made our way to the elevator that would ultimately take us out of here. The only thing is, our ride is now surrounded by even more enemies. Now, I could just run and jump into the Delamain and get the hell out of here, but I was thirsty for more crafting components. So, while Jackie's bleeding out, I decided it was in my best interest to wipe out all the Arasaka goons and scavenge their corpses for loot. I eventually made my way into the car, getting shot at as we drove off by dudes who were just a bit too late to the party. Hey, remember that chase scene from my last video, and you remember how much trouble it caused me? Yeah, well, it was cake this time around. Liberty is a badass motherfucker. Not to mention, they didn't shoot at me once. I don't know what that was about. But my best guess is my computer is so incapable of keeping up with this game that bugs are bound to occur more often than they really should. Either way, a win's a win. Jackie then takes his last breath, and I began to wrestle with all 5 stages of grief, all in a matter of about 35 seconds. After linking back up with Dex and knowing his intentions this time, I decided to plant myself on the couch, far away from his gorilla of a bodyguard. After about 2 minutes of waiting around, talking about the fallout of this stupid operation, I do a sick 270 but get blindy no-scoped by Dex's goon and put down like a rabid dog. What is this game, dude? What now?
Now we can finally play the game.
Oh wait, skipping the Johnny parts. Now we can finally play the game. I finally spring back to life in what you might call a big ol' pile of trash, but I just simply call home. I got the pleasure of watching Takamura bang Dex in the face, but then forced me to inject a mystery fluid he promised me he crafted himself. I'm then awarded with another driving section that somehow ends with Goro banging another dude up against a pole, this time with his car. As I'm slowly bleeding out, I give Takamura the name of the Ripper I trusted most, Vic. There I was again, back in Vic's chair and feeling like shit. He told me there was a man in my head that someone else crafted and the run was failed because of it. Well, I told him that what he was saying was bullshit, because since I craft my own destiny and that destiny led to my death, then subsequent rebirth, one could argue that without these events even transpiring, he wouldn't exist at all. So in a roundabout way, he was crafted by me. He is no longer the chip. He is me, and I am him. We are one.
We are farmers, bum 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 bum.
Anyways, after getting patched up at Vic's, I'm off to get more rest, since my time in the trash nap wasn't enough. I woke up to a jump scare since I'd forgotten that when I was in the settings, turned off nudity. And while I was there, I also saw there was an alternate Johnny and wanted to see what he looked like. And boy did I get a good laugh when I saw this dude. They really did Keanu dirty with that fucking haircut. It's even more hilarious to me since I'd planned on being nice to Johnny this go around, and now I gotta be nice to this guy. But since we're both confused as hell, we immediately start bickering like siblings. Although, amidst the chaos, he did offer me one good piece of advice.
Stick some iron in your mouth and pull the trigger.
After downing my medicine, I was off to meet up with Goro at Tom's Diner. He'd like us to work together, and while I do have my reservations, he can be a valuable tool for getting into Arasaka and finding out how to solve this relic problem. I reluctantly agree to poke around for her, starting by calling Judy. She doesn't really want to talk about Evelyn, so out of respect, I was just gonna chase another lead. I swung by the Afterlife and met up with one of Johnny's old pals, Rogue. But before that, hey, how's it going? Could I get you a drink? Oh, you're leaving. I see. So nice weather, huh? Alright. See you later. It's fucking weird. What are you, deaf? Once back on track, I met with Rogue, paid her fee, and went to wait at the bar. Once she was ready, she waved me over to tell me about a man named Hellman. He was going to be my key to solving this little chip problem. The only problem is, I couldn't do this job alone. But oh my stars by the love of Liza, it was my lucky day. The help Rogue enlisted for me was the same chick I was hitting on moments ago. This was my chance to impress her and maybe to get to know her. As any respectable gentleman would, I do not partake in the close observation of one's derriere if given thine an opportunity, as that would be of low class and or beta, and I am a sigma. I do skip her phone call with Boz though, cause man does she yap a lot. We ventured to the Aldecado's camp and asked her friends Mitch and Scorpion for help on the job, but in typical fashion, they're not willing to help. Oh well, we got this. After getting back her car and clearing up her outstanding balance with Rogue, Pan Am and I get ready to relocate and capture Hellman, which required me to fire this turret that I certainly didn't craft. Regardless, I took out the bots, overloaded the pylon, and took down the aircraft. All that was left to do was find the down craft and exfil with Hellman. Too bad it's not that easy. Her buddies who didn't really want to help us with this job in the first place now want to help us with the job, not really knowing it at the time. And of course we took out our communication by blowing up the pylon, so yeah, here we are. I used a drone to get a lay of the land before storming the castle and found that Pan Am's crew had already lost their fight. I clear all the bots, twice, since I got murked by the ship's defense systems the first time, but once I kill them all and disable the security, I open the door to find Mitch with a gun to his head, and I didn't hesitate to draw my weapon and blast the dude holding him immediately in the face multiple times. Time for another perk talk with Sweaty. So the next big perk I wanted to talk about was Deadeye. Deadeye functions similarly to Focus, where its first few levels are bonuses to damage and such, but it also reduces stamina for shooting, and when stamina is above 85%, I get another 25% headshot and weak spot damage. This was an incredible boost to my damage output, plus it made all my headshots sound like lasers. Now back to the video. Pan Am and I are now hot on Hellman's tracks as we give chase. The tracks stopped at a remote gas station, and as I looped around to the backside of the building, I managed to pull off some insane Nitro Circus type shit and make it onto the roof. This was apparently pretty inconspicuous as it never raised any alarm. I didn't have high enough level in tech, so I wasn't able to crack open the emergency exits, but what I did have was Liberty. And you may have noticed she's looking a bit sexier than her usual self. And that was because I done crafted her up a sight and silencer so I could be more accurate and more sneaky when I'm up against multiple enemies. And that's what I was dealing with here, multiple enemies. As I hopped down off the roof, I narrowly escaped the side of a roaming bot, but as I climbed over the fence on the side of the building, one of the goons guarding Hellman managed to spot me while I was sliding into cover. Still not entirely sure how they saw me, but it was now open season and it was me versus the world. Well, at least me versus this group of enemies. There were about 6 enemies and 2 bots I had to deal with here, which was a lot less than I remember having to deal with last time I played, but I'll take it. Once all the enemies were dealt with, I swept the building and accidentally walked in on Hellman and his friend doing something they certainly didn't want me to see. I took care of his friend to prove how serious this whole thing was, then proceeded to gift him a goose egg, courtesy of the backside of my gun. Then, just as I was on my way out of the building with Hellman over my shoulder, a song started playing on the radio, and I had to just take a moment and feel something again. Once I got back to the motel with Hellman and got the relic's blueprints, I then proceeded out the door to find Johnny out there waiting for me. We flirted with the idea of actually caring about one another for a minute, and he takes the time to tell me about Mikoshi, what it is, and how it all relates to my real goal. In the handful of playthroughs I've had with this game, I've always skipped these parts with Johnny, so it was interesting to me the amount of key lore it provides and how you'll miss out on it by always taking the pills and shutting Johnny up. I don't know why I always skipped it, I just thought he was like a bad guy and an asshole. After handing over Hellman to Goro, I then left for Lizzie's to catch back up with Judy and find out where Evelyn was. I totally forgot about her. That was literally my first gig back from the grave and I'm just now getting around to it. Well done, V. Well done. Anyway, like usual, Judy gives me the name of the sex dungeon that Evelyn typically works for and suggested I start my search there. But before I left, I witnessed this chick literally hover sitting mid-air. Man, technology in 2077 goes hard. On my long walk to Clouds, I got 2 calls. One was from Mr. Hands, who lets me know he could be of use to me because he was so well connected. Okay, weird flex. And the other was from Goro, requesting me to meet with him and an old business associate of his. This was good news for me, since half the time I can't even get the fucking game to register that it's been 24 hours and I need Takamura to call me to fucking progress the game and you motherfuckers... Shit. I just wanna play. Shitty computer aside, I got to Clouds no problem, and instead of fucking with all the bullshit about asking 20 questions, I just crafted up a couple weapons while inside, drew the shotgun, and fired at the first lone person I'd seen. I was ready for the brigade of enemies that were sure to rush in my direction, so I posted up behind some cover and lay in wait. After only about a second or two, I realized there were no alert sounds, nor anyone coming in my direction. And the cherry on top was the fact that the dude I straight up murdered happened to have a VIP access token. Now that's just dumb luck. As I'm making my way toward the boss's room, I stupidly force open one of the doors, not knowing it would put me in view of an enemy's sight, making the whole stealth plan go right out the window. I took out the lone enemy just past the door and sought refuge in the room he occupied. Using the door and some surrounding cover to my advantage, I go about slowly picking off all the enemies that were on this floor. Once I had a decent amount of them incapacitated, I went about getting into the boss's room, killing him with my Turbo Gun 9000, then checking his emails for leads that would inevitably take me to Fingers, the man with the hands sanitizer. This time, I ain't fucking around. I'm ripping open that door, getting the information I needed, then punching that ugly ass piece of shit until he's no longer conscious. You're sick. You all know the deal here. Meeting up with Judy in her van, I watched the Mothhead's BD I got from this trustworthy gentleman, and find some critical clues in order to locate the place we suspect Evelyn to be. The infiltration of this compound could have gone worse, but it certainly wasn't my best work. There were many close calls, even within trying to fight the first 4 or 5 enemies out front. Once I'd taken care of all of them and my health had regenerated to a reasonable amount, I got inside and pushed down to the basement where I would meet back up with Judy. Down here, there are 3 enemies in the first room we have to pass through, so I attempted to kite one of them into another room to separate them, but he ended up being a straight up Chad, and I somehow randomly entered the photo capture mode to revel in my immediate regret, hilariously capturing the exact moment before death. But on round 2, the Chad was no issue, except for the fact that his head was apparently the size of a pea, but this time I was able to take him out without sustaining any injuries. As for his 2 counterparts, yeah, they were no issue at all. The next room had a couple of sketchy moments, but the enemies were just rolling into the room one by one, so it was a pretty easy area. And last but not least, we had the boiler room. Lots of enemies, but plenty of cover, making this place a clean sweep as well. Old Lady Liberty being my right-hand woman all along the way. And don't you worry your pretty little head about Mr. Shotgun. He'll get his flowers soon enough. So after locating, then relocating Evelyn to Judy's apartment, I don't want things to end badly for her, so I refrain from touching her this time. But do continue to ask her my most pressing question. twice.
Listen, Evelyn.
She still wouldn't answer me, so I got up to talk to Judy, who managed to retrieve some BDs from Evelyn's implant. These BDs point me toward Pacifica, which is the Voodoo Boys' neighborhood. Boy, am I glad that Mr. Hands guy called earlier. I hope he can find me a lead. I was on my way over to Japantown where I was to meet up with Goro when Hands surprisingly called me back. Man, that was fast. Quid pro quo. That's the name of the game. If I do something for them, they'll grant me my audience with Brigitte. Fair enough, but first I want to meet with this associate of Goro's and see if he was willing to hear me out on this whole Saburo situation. And of course, he's not. And better yet, threatened us if we chose to intervene. Looks like we were on our own for this one, Goro. But wait, there is somebody who may be able to help. Wakako. I strolled over to her place and waited around for Goro to show up, but after many attempts and wasted time, I gave up and moved on to help Pan Am rescue Saul. This time, I wanted to play it exactly how they wanted me to, stealthily. Turns out, I'm not so good at it. After a few revivals, I eventually make it down to where Saul was being held without a trace, except for this dude right here, cause he was all alone and I could deal with him without any interference. I reached Saul and stuck him with an air hypo to wake his body back up so he could help me get the hell out of here. There's an alternate path to take that would lead me straight out of here, but apparently this fence takes technical knowledge to break, not just brute force. The fuck? Whatever. The only way out was through at this point, so Saul and I easily shot our way through, up and out of the complex, and into our getaway van. Just kidding. I got flatlined multiple times, one time even making it to the chase scene, but that shit flatlined me so quick. Upon repeated failures of the brute force approach, Saul and I decided it was best to avoid all conflict and sneak over to where Pan Am had parked the van. And I didn't get a chase scene? I mean, it only makes sense. No one even knew we were there, but this was great news. We rode off with no problems to the abandoned shack for the night, and upon waking up, Pan Am gives me with that sweet, sweet sniper. Too bad I can't actually use it. But I'm certainly picking it up since I feel like I'm making headway with Pan Am in the romance department, and picking this gun up is the only thing standing in my way, so into my inventory it goes and immediately into my stash. Once that was safe inside my stash, I set off to Pacifica to meet up with my contact at the church. The man who meets me is just the man before the man who I was really here to meet. He, ironically, wanted to meet me at the meat store. Oh, Placide. Always gotta be a pain in my ass, don't you? Of course, my main objective now was to make my way through the gym and retrieve whatever intel was stored on a van that was brought in a few days ago by the roided out freaks. And again, the mission heavily implies sneaking around everyone and avoiding a fight, and since I knew this would be just chaos if I just chose to fight with my puny little weapons, I wouldn't stand a chance. So again, I opted for stealth. Yeah, I know, this is cheap, but it is what it is. However, that doesn't mean I didn't partake in a little combat. I was just extremely calculated and quiet. I made it to the cinema with a solid 6 kills to my name and no one was the wiser. In the cinema, I met with an agent in Netwatch and contemplated killing him instantly, but then I remembered how much I actually disliked the Voodoo Boys and agreed to set them up. Afterwards, safely exiting the building and meeting back up with Placide, and he's not too happy about what happened during the blackout. I'm rescued by none other than Brigitte, who's finally awake thanks to me. As much as I really didn't want to help the Voodoo Boys, it was truly my only option if I wanted to get in contact with Alt. So after submersing myself in an ice bath and plummeting into the deep recesses of my mind to access Johnny's memories, obligatory Johnny skip, I finally get my chance to cross into the black wall and make contact with Alt. Upon bringing me back and revealing herself to the Voodoo Boys, Netwatch pulls the trigger on their plan to fry Brigitte and the rest of the Voodoo Boys as netrunners. Alt blinks us back to safety behind the black wall where I get to learn what she knew about Mikoshi and see if there was any possible way to gain access to it. Once I'd learned all I could from Alt, I'd disconnect from the web and come back to reality, waking up beside a bunch of limp corpses. Shit, saved me the ammo. However, I do still need to fight my way out of their compound and put a stop to Placide. The two groups of enemies were no problem, blazing past both of them and onto the man himself. Now, the trick to fighting Placide is to never let him shoot you. It's really as simple as that. I proved it with my last challenge and proved it again here. There's an angle you can stand where V leans around the doorway just enough to see Placide's fat head and just dump mag after mag of whatever ammo your gun requires until he's put to rest. All that was left to do was walk out of the front doors and have another chat with Johnny. finally breaking down and lighting up a cigarette to briefly indulge in some much needed stress relief. Having the realest conversation I think I'd ever had with Johnny, which was pretty cool. After cutting ties with the Voodoo Boys, I went back over to Wakako's to see if Goro finally took the time to stop by, and by God, he made it. Wakako hands over the plans for the parade, which inspired Goro to begin hatching a plan to reach Hanako and tell her the truth. She was our last and only hope. So all that was left to do was wait. I had no other jobs from Pan Am, nor any other main quests, so I chose to just skip time, advancing 24 hours into the future. After not getting a call 24 hours after I was told to wait, and even after a few minutes of further waiting, I decided to use this time to go back and pay Vic and get a tarot reading from Misty. After this, I still wasn't awarded a call, so I waited another 24 hours. Surely this would be enough time, right? I mean, the instructions are pretty clear. Wait 24 hours, still no call. I figured, fine, I'll go to my apartment, get some rest, and in another 24 hours, I'll wake up to the call I've been waiting for. Still, nothing. See, this is what I was talking about earlier. I don't know if this is a game issue or a hardware issue. Either way, it was fucking annoying. It still wasn't until I got into the elevator to leave my apartment complex that he finally fucking calls. About damn time. I met back up with Goro at the address he provided me so he could lay it all out for me. His plan was quite risky for the both of us, but it was the only option we had. After a short briefing and a quick bite, I'm tasked, again, to wait. Well, at least this time I got a call from my love and she needed my help. When I got there, she and Saul were engaged in another one of their infamous squabbles. I mean, all she wanted was to steal a high-tech piece of Militech equipment from a convoy traveling around a nearby highway. She already had a plan and everything. All I had to do was just show up. She must have just wanted my company. Her plan involved getting this abandoned train engine moving so we could use it to block the path of the convoy. We're successful at getting it going, stargaze the night away, and then, come morning, we enact our plan. To a fairly easy success. I had plenty of cover thanks to the multiple vehicles in our own convoy, as well as my party's constant suppressive fire. After we showed back up at camp with this new tank in tow, Saul was, no surprise, pissed off. But that didn't stop Pan Am from ensuring that we got our use out of this new badass toy. So, yeah. I had about 2, maybe 3 hours worth of footage just up and get corrupted mid-recording. This was unfortunate because the Pan Am tank scene was quite hilarious and crazy to me. If you know, you know. But really, I only lost this tank scene and the prep work that it took to get to Oda. You know, all the snipers and such. It really wasn't all that hard. These areas have plenty of cover and you can just run past the bots near the third sniper on the bridge. But fortunately for me, I took a break to get some water during my attempts at taking on Oda, and I managed to catch the error and successfully record my winning attempt. So, here that is. Now, there were 3 things I needed to watch out for with Oda. Firstly was his melee. If I get hit by this, it's basically insta-death. Secondly was his goddamn smart pistol. Also an insta-death if you don't quickly find cover. And lastly, his healing. This was the most important to look out for because not only is it the most opportune time to get a few free hits off on him, you also don't want him to reverse too much of the damage you've already inflicted on him. Keeping these 3 things in mind, Oda isn't actually too bad of a fight under most circumstances, and the free hits he allows during his healing phases make this fight a breeze. As I neared the end of a somewhat lengthy fight, and as Oda reached 16% health, he glitches again. This time, he ended up getting stuck mid-air in the final moments of the fight. What the hell is up with this dude? I think he's honestly the buggiest boss fight I've ever encountered. This time, I end up totally, accidentally ending Oda's life. What? I didn't even know that was an option. I met back up with Goro and Hanako at a remote hotel that apparently wasn't as remote as my friend originally thought. After a flashbang floor collapse combo, I find myself positioned between 2 groups of heavily armored Arasaka soldiers, and in order to prove my loyalty to a friend, I went back for Takamura, saving him from certain death. You see, I don't always run from a fight. After escaping to that one motel in the Badlands to hide out, I'm visited by a proxy sent by Hanako. She wanted to meet to discuss my options regarding the relic in my head, but before I could get to the meeting, the relic sent me into a blackout, waking me back up in Pacifica with Johnny. This conversation was probably the realest one we've ever had together, excluding the final one, obviously. But seriously, I didn't know Johnny had feelings beyond hate. After wrapping it up with Johnny, I head over to Embers to pass the point of no return and finish this game once and for all, my way. Reviving for the 4th time back at Vic's, you already know the deal. Take the easy way out or see this through to the end. And I'd made up my mind. Through to the end it is. Up on the rooftops, I dial up Pan Am. This time it's me asking her for help. I need her and the rest of the Aldecaldo's help taking down Arasaka. I know, it sounds crazy, but she agrees. No way. Just like that? Well, I guess we do have a giant Militech tank now, so maybe we actually do stand a chance. Before storming the castle, I took one last dip in the ice bath to talk to Alt to go over the plan one last time. This dive into the web took so much processing power that it resulted in the loss of some of Dakota's equipment. Oops. One last order of business before heading out was to officially become an Aldecaldo. What an honor. And before you start yapping about me not crafting this jacket so I can't wear it, ever heard of crafting a destiny? Oh, that's right, I told you about it earlier, didn't I? Our plan was to access a massive drill and drill our way into a Mikoshi access point. There was one located nearby that we could take over, and our plan was to do just that. Our arrival wasn't received very well by the local officials guarding the place, leading to a standoff between my new crew and a few hordes of enemies. I end up doing most of the work, almost die by walking into a scripted carpet bomb or some shit, and then ended up cheesing the fuck out of the mech, gunning us down from afar. Once we got the drill going again and breaking through to the underground tunnels, Pan Am, Saul, and I continue on towards the access point. This wouldn't be an Arasaka compound if there wasn't a dozen armed guards and netrunners walking around at all times, would it? I attempted to brute force my way through this place a couple of times, all resulting in failures, which led me to try my hand at a much stealthier option. This lasted all of like 30 seconds before I was spotted, and it was, again, an all-out firefight, just like every other time. Except this time was a little different. This time, I had Saul and Pan Am as essentially meat shields, allowing me to inflict damage while minimizing taking it. After a successful clear of the room, we pushed further into the next room, which contained the freshly fried synapses of all the Arasaka netrunners. Thank you all. Certainly that's it, right? The next room had to be the access point. My journey was finally over. I could finally get rid of Johnny and live happily ever after with Pan Am and the Aldecaldos. And just as I'm nearing the home stretch, guess who comes a knocking? Out of nowhere comes Adam fucking Smasher, and this time, he looks even angrier. With his final moments, Saul lands one point-blank butt shock? The fuck is a butt shock? Point-blank buckshot right to Adam's chest, resulting in his head getting Adam smashed. Now, I don't usually get too invested in the story as much when I do these challenge playthroughs of these games, mostly because I've already played through them ad nauseum and have heard the tale told a billion times, but I really haven't sunk too much time into this game due to only having an incredibly outdated Xbox when this game released, so this moment right here felt incredibly gut-wrenching. I'd been through so much with the Aldecaldos, and all their lives were lost for me. Don't worry, Saul, I will avenge you. Okay, so Adam Smasher with base tier craftable loot. This should be fun. My first few attempts were more so focused on trying to learn Adam's moveset while also charting the ins and outs of this new map I was unfamiliar with, as it was a bit different than last time. With this final act of courage, Saul leaves us with a solid 20% head start off Adam's health, which I'll take any day of the week. Like I said, I spent many of these preliminary runs figuring out how Adam moves, which weapons may work better against him, and overall, just learning. By about my 7th attempt, I feel I'd learned almost everything I thought I needed to, so I went into my closet, pulled out my tryhard pants, and attempted to take him on for real this time. And what better way to end than to use the gun that carried me through the majority of this run? Lady Liberty. Attempt after attempt flew by without me getting his health anywhere below even 70%, and that's with Saul's 20% handicap. I felt I was getting nowhere with the pistol, and I was still extremely scared of Adam, so it was rare that I took the time to even look back at it. Well, I have a few other guns in my arsenal I could try, as well as a few others I hadn't even touched, so I switched it up to the shotgun, even though I wasn't spec'd for it, to see what kind of damage I can inflict on him. Unfortunately, this was a bust as well. I kept feeling as if the big factor here was that he gave me no time to breathe. I never felt comfortable turning around without a huge risk of being hit. Attempt after attempt, bust after bust, all pitiful attempts on Smasher's life. Then, before opening the door to encounter probably another death, I thought about all the weapons I haven't used on this run at all. After some scrolling, I came across this smart revolver called the DR-12 Quasar. This gun, when combined with some very cool sounding perks, still didn't do jack shit. That, and I have no idea how to use smart weapons. Now that I'm looking back, I realize that I respect into technology when choosing this tech weapon because, it's a tech weapon. I thought it would give me an advantage and a chance to try out some interesting new perks, right? Wrong. I see now that it is indeed a revolver, and I wiped all the perks I had buffing, you guessed it, revolvers. I know. I'm an idiot. I only had one decent attempt with the DR, but eventually decided to move on from it. My Hail Mary last hope relied on the success of my double-barreled shotgun, the DB2 Satara. I told you this gun would get its flowers. This build was better than any of the others thus far, and that's solely for the fact that body is the main attribute to spec for shotguns. And guess which attribute gives you an additional 2 health per point spent? That's right, body. So after dumping 20 points into body, grabbing all the shotgun and health related perks, I dumped the rest of my points into reflexes for the ability to reload at any time since I'm going to be doing a lot of running, the dash since I don't have a double jump, and every other movement related perk I had the points to buy. I felt much better about this build going into it since I felt a bit tankier as well as being a bit more mobile. Hopefully this combo would make me less scared to turn around and actually fire a shot at him. Well, after a few attempts to get my feet wet with the new build, I'd finally had the run of my life. I felt invincible with this dash. It was finicky from time to time, but I think that was likely due to a lack of stamina, which I wouldn't know either way because all that stuff is just noise to me, so I prefer to play without it. So I found that the combination of a slide followed up by a dash would send me skating across the ground in a quick forward motion, almost like a slide cancel. This was the key to my success during this attempt. I was able to finally see his other phases. Some doors open up on the battlefield like last time and let some Arasaka henchmen out to come assist Adam. They spawned up on the catwalk above me, and the only way I could either see or shoot them was with range, so I was kinda stuck fighting Adam while dodging around the incoming bullets from above. Not ideal. I prevailed for much longer than I anticipated, bringing Adam down to a staggering 29% health before biting the dust, dusted by the goons on the catwalk. Yup, that's enough for tonight. I'll see you again, Smasher. Today is a new day. I just got home from work, had a nice hot meal in my belly, and it's time to play some games. Now, where was I? Oh right, Smasher. Well, like I said, it's a new day. Let's see what a bit of time does to the soul to help prepare it for another attempt at a previously failed trial. Awesome. Well, let's call it a warm-up. I gotta get the first few out of my system and it'll all be okay. On my second attempt, I did a little better, but still got shot in the face with a missile, flatlining me in spectacular fashion. A few more attempts go by with peaks and valleys, retraining my brain on how to tell my fingers what sequences of buttons to push and when, and establishing a firm line of communication with my eyes in order to react faster. All of this work had to amount to something, right? I would eventually beat Adam Smasher with these pitiful tier 2 weapons, right? Well, that, my friends, is what kills me about this run. I was so close. I mean, 29%. It's not too bad. If those fucking goons hadn't spawned on the damn roof, I would have had that. Adam was a valiant foe with unmatched speed and an army of men at his side. I mean, I had Pan Am, but most of her time would be spent staring at the ground on her hands and knees, and not for the reasons you'd think, you perv. I couldn't beat him. There was no way. I wasn't skilled enough. Shoving these negative thoughts deep down, I reloaded that save, watched Saul's head turn to applesauce, and rose my weapon to Adam Smasher in the most tense fight of my life. After fighting Adam so many times, I'd seen everything he had to offer, and now have acquired knowledge on when are good openings to engage and fire, and when it's best to just cut your losses and run. The best times I found to get a shot off on Adam was after dodging one of his melee attacks as he takes a moment to recover from it, right before he hits you with a melee if you have a dash to get out of there, and the best being when he does his ground slam, as you can usually get 2 charged shots off on him. Oh, and feel free to use Pan Am as a body shield whenever you can. And never ever engage him while he has his minigun out. This will only result in pain. Take cover for the duration, trust me. Once again, at 50% health, the Arasaka goons showed up to ruin our date. And thank the gods, these ones spawned down here with me. I could actually reach them. And with this shotgun, these punks were nothing but fish in a barrel, especially with the Obliterate perk. Blown to smithereens. Then, when Smasher's at 33% health, he calls upon 2 beefcakes with miniguns in a feeble attempt at support. They maybe got 4 shots off on me total. I'm telling you, this shotgun build was the move. After taking them out, it was just me versus Smasher, mano y mano. Well, Pan Am was there too, but that's about the extent of her help. At this point, Adam somehow became easier. There were so many more stall points in his attacks now, and I was able to chew through the rest of his health and act like I didn't just have my ass handed to me for a little over a day and a half. The only thing I really had to worry about for the rest of this fight was this one move that has this insanely obvious tell. Adam will stand in the middle of his arena and fire off a couple dozen rockets. Now, normally, if they connected with me, these rockets would deal an incredible amount of pain. Definitely enough to flatline me. But this was comically thwarted by simply standing behind a wall and waiting for him to finish, which thankfully also has a distinctive sound to clue you into when it's safe to come out and start blasting. This fight was just sort of a new rendition on the last time I fought him, except for this time, instead of double jumping around the arena, I was slide dashing. Since Johnny and I are now pals, I do him the one favor he asked of me and put Adam to rest for good. I can finally move on to the access point of Mikoshi where I could jack in, meet up with Johnny and Alt, and figure out how to save us both. Sparing you the minute details of what happened next, I chose to live in my body for whatever time I had left with Pan Am and what's left of the Aldecaldos, where I get this really beautiful scene between V and Pan Am. And it was at this moment right here where I totally regretted not making V look normal. This scene lost all of its power for me with this horrendous monster on screen trying to replicate emotions. Oh well, I had a good time regardless. Oh, and I also got to find out that you can indeed beat Cyberpunk 2077 with just the base craftables. I think I'll be working on a new Metal Gear 5 challenge next, and it might take some time since I have quite the task ahead of me, but I hope y'all are excited for that, and till next time, I'll see you guys later.
Well?
It's perfect. All great, Pan Am. We're going home.